So I just wanted to say thank you again for everyone for coming to this talk. This is something that I am extremely passionate about. You'll see why towards the middle of this talk. This will be, if you were at the Friday night one, a little less content and more stuff to really leave here thinking about how we can make our activism a little bit more sustainable, how we can be a little bit more effective with our activism and hopefully sustain that long term. I just want to start this one out. I usually start every talk out with a hug, but this one is a little bit different. I mean, you can hug people if you'd like to hug people. Oh, perfect.
Kayla.
What's up? Welcome. If you want to grab a quick drink of tea or coffee in the back, we're just getting started. You didn't miss much. Yeah, we didn't do hugs in this one, so you can just get your hugs afterwards. But I wanted to start this one off. I do every single sustainable activism talk with a little close your eyes thing, whatever you want to call it. So if everyone could just close their eyes really quickly for me. And I want you to envision your perfect day of rest, of recharge, of relaxation. What does that look like? Is it Netflix? Is it smoothie bowls? Is it walks on the beach? Just think about that for a minute. All right, so for time, I like to cut that a little short. I'm pretty sure you probably could have all just like meditated on that and sat there for a while. I really like doing this exercise, that's what it is, it's an exercise, not a thing. I really like doing this exercise because I get to see there's a lot of smiles on people's faces. I do this for one reason, to show vegans and activists that what you thought of right now, and this is what I'm advocating for, is we need to be having more of those days, more of those moments, more of those activities, whatever it is that recharges you, that fills you up with joy, that makes you feel rested, so that you can have these days, so that when we are out there fighting for the animals, we are at as close to, and if not 100% energy. So by the end of this talk, my goal is to encourage and inspire people to have more of these days, because most of the time what you thought about is stuff that your body, your mind, your soul is craving, or just stuff that really makes you feel good and gives you those uninterrupted rest days. So I like to start with that. How things will go for this talk, it'll be a shorter talk. We'll have a Q&A at the end, so if you do have any questions, it would be awesome if you can hold those until the end, unless something is like you need to say. I don't know why I'm looking at you. I feel like you might have had a question today. And I'll just give a brief, 1-minute intro as to who I am, just so I can give you some information before I just tell you some stuff. So if you already know who I am, you just get to hear the minute recap of who I am. The first part of this talk is going to be on headspace and regaining control of our headspace. And the reason why I talk about that first and foremost, a lot of people are like, well, just talk about the activism stuff. Talk about how we can sustain our activism. Well, I think that if we don't regain control of our headspace or just focus on creating a positive mental attitude, especially with what we see as vegans and as activists living in a non-vegan world, how are we supposed to go out there and do effective activism if we are in a negative headspace or mindset? So I focus a lot of my time and energy on creating more positivity in here than negativity, so that'll be first. And then the second part is going to be about the activism stuff. I'll share my story of unsustainability as an activist and my experience with severe burnout and how that sort of changed my life, changed my vision on my activism and my purpose and my just goals and hopes and dreams and aspirations in life, and how I was able to come back from that and then develop this talk and give this talk all around the world. And then I'll share a few more tips and tricks for different things that we could be doing that I feel have worked for myself and for a lot of other people involved in these talks, that have helped them actually do more activism, utilize more energy, more resources, but move further away from this being burnt out, this laziness, this unmotivation, this going into this misanthropic view of I hate the world. So there's a lot of stuff that we can work on that I saw a couple facial expressions. Maybe you're feeling that right now. I am sometimes. So just a quick speed through who I am. Sorry if you're watching this video back. My name is Joshua Entis, animal liberation activist from Seattle, but I was born and raised in LA. I'm just not the biggest fan of Southern California. Lived a very Los Angeles lifestyle, was focused on money and status and what other people thought about me. I ate a lot of animals. I hunted, I fished, but I was always living sort of not in alignment with the way I truly felt on the inside. I was always this like nonconformist, but I never really accepted the fact that it was okay to live according to how my heart was truly feeling and how I wanted to live. 2014, veganism found me. My best friend and I just Googled healthiest diet. Veganism came up, high-fived each other, went vegan. It was super easy, but then realized it wasn't that I was vegan. For those 2 years, I was plant-based. I was still wearing animal products. I was still going to zoos. I was still betting on horses, not because I wanted to. I was just uneducated. It was just innocent ignorance. Watched Earthlings, mind, body, soul aligned. That's when I realized that I needed to do more, that it was one thing to, just idly sit by and be vegan for myself, but I realized that veganism isn't a diet choice, that it was a framework, a lifestyle, an ideology. That's also what kicked my butt into gear to get active. Started the Anonymous for the Voiceless chapter in Seattle, started just doing so much activism. Quit my job, I was a salesman, and then decided to just travel the world and meet as many activists as possible and do as many actions as possible. So I did the last 14 months. I went to 21 countries, over 100 cities, and just did not way too much activism, so much activism, and really learned a lot, gained a lot of insight and perspective from activist communities around the world. Had a couple situations where I got pretty emotionally and physically exhausted, which is why I created this, to hopefully offer some of my insight and perspective on what I think we need to be doing in this movement to make sure that we're able to sustain this long term. Because, and you'll see why I'm so passionate about this, so many people that I met, even the people that you might know that don't talk about it, are experiencing some of the symptoms of feeling unmotivated, lazy, these burnout symptoms of doing so much activism and consuming so much of this negativity, either via on the front lines or from social media, which is a huge factor into what we consume, this pain, this suffering, the tragedy that we see, which is swiping through our social media feeds. So I want to get a quick show of hands. This is a safe space. Don't feel like you have to raise your hand. But how many of you have dealt with something negative in your life before? I always get a laugh. I love it. I'm waiting for the day when there's no laugh and I can't use that joke. How many of you are dealing with something negative right now? How many of you feel like you're not doing enough for the animals? And how many of you might be feeling symptoms of burnout, compassion fatigue, where you're lazy, being unmotivated, feeling exhausted from just the activism that you are doing? So I didn't do this to call anyone out and be like, oh, you stink. I just think that I did this to show that everyone is so alike. And the first two questions, 100% of the people raise their hand and laugh about have dealt with something negative in the past. So everyone has gone through something. So I always like to be mindful of that, especially when we're working within communities with people trying to strengthen this movement. If we can always remember that someone has gone through something in their past, which might dictate how their behaviors are now, we can be a little bit more laser focused on when communicating with activists. Currently dealing with something negative now is usually like 70% or more. That's also another thing that we got to keep in mind. Sometimes infighting happens between activists, but we never take a second to actually think this person might just be going through something in their life right now. Or if they're not coming out and getting active, some activists might be like, you stink, you stink. I'm using the word you stink today. So some people might be hating on activists for not coming out and getting active and bashing them online, which I've seen countless times around the world, without being mindful that they just might be going through something in their life. So be laser focused on the fact that within your communities and within the communities around the world, people have gone through something or are currently going through something right now. So just be super mindful of that. The feeling of not doing enough for the animals is usually 70, 80% or more of people raise their hand. I've given this talk in 60 cities around the world, and it's always that statistic, which is a number that I would like to see go down. And something that I focus a lot on is helping people understand that if you're getting out there and being active for the animals, you are doing something. And this feeling of not doing enough comes because we're going up against the biggest industries, the most amount of cognitive dissonance, just ignorance at its finest. And so when we're not seeing, and for myself, when I'm not seeing this instant gratification, this instant change, we tend to bring ourselves down. We're like, oh, I'm only going to 1 cube of truth a week or a vigil. I'm not seeing the change I want. I don't feel like I'm doing enough for the animals. Be proud that you're out there doing something for the animals first and foremost, and that might help build some confidence and empower you to do even more with your free time doing activism. And then the feeling mentally, physically worn down, or maybe symptoms of burnout is anywhere from 50% or more. I'd like to see that number go to 0. It's tough. I feel like I'm constantly in that position. So that's why I created this talk, is to hopefully have people learn a few things and open up their minds to maybe new approaches that we can take with our advocacy and how we can work on sustaining our activism long term. Because yes, when you go vegan, especially now, and you become active, you have so much passion, so much drive, and you want to get out there and you want to take to the streets and do everything that you can, which is amazing, and I support that, but I want people to be mindful of how they're feeling on the inside, and that's what I talk a lot about today. So that's why I like to ask those questions, just to get a glimpse of how everyone's feeling. So, first part of it, focusing on our headspace. As activists, like I said in the beginning, we see an incredible amount of injustice, pain, suffering, torture, death, whether you are just behind the screen on social media, standing outside of a slaughterhouse, investigations inside of these killing factories, protesting on the street, dealing with a bunch of negative and ignorant interactions, yelling at family, yelling at friends, yelling at coworkers. We consume so much, and it takes a huge toll on our headspace. And myself, in the beginning, wasn't paying attention to how I was feeling. I was just so passionate, so aggressive, so frustrated and angry, which is okay. We can understand why we feel this way, but I wasn't allowing myself to really look deep within and take care of my headspace, because we put ourselves on the front lines, and if our mental well-being isn't looked after, it's going to significantly it's going to negatively impact our activism, or when we're out there on the streets. Before going into really focusing on this stuff, when I got into my activism and I was doing Cubes of Truth, I always had a negative headspace. I would always look at someone watching footage, or if I went to talk with my grandpa, and in my head there was so much negativity. I was like, this person's going to give me butt lions, and they're going to yell at me, and it's going to be an aggressive argument. They're going to be a farmer and say that they love killing animals. I filled up my headspace with so much negativity. And so what happened was, when I went into those conversations, I was a little bit more on edge. I was a little bit more frustrated. I snapped a little bit more. The conversations weren't as pleasant. They weren't as positive, and me asking questions, it was more of me getting upset when I wasn't hearing what I wanted to hear. But I did some just soul searching and really figured out that if I changed my mindset, I know this might sound a little corny, but if you change your mindset to have more positive thoughts when you go into this form of activism or any type of conversation that you have, the odds of you having a more positive conversation is going to be there. And I know it might sound silly, but try it. I'm telling you, when I made that switch and I realized that instead of thinking, this person is going to hate me, this person's going to give me Jesus ate fish and protein and whatnot, I started thinking, this person's going to be open-minded. This person's going to listen. This person's going to ask great questions, and then I'm going to ask great questions. This person might leave taking veganism seriously and give me a hug. And I started to think about this in a positive light, so when I would approach those conversations, I was a little bit more calm. I was a little bit more relaxed. Same thing happens when I went to vigils and I started shifting my mindset. I used to be in a really high negative emotional state when I would go to a vigil. I'd be really pissed at the world. I would not be taking a love-based approach with my activism when going to a slaughterhouse. I would get upset at the workers. My videos, when I would talk to social media, I would be really upset and fired up, which is understandable. Started to switch my headspace going into these actions and going to slaughterhouses and say, how can I not exhaust as much energy and resources, and just how can I take care of my headspace when going to these actions so I can, 1, get through that demo, and 2, carry that to the next action so that I'm not just burning myself out going to one vigil, being super angry, upset, and negative. So I just switched my mindset. And I think that focusing on our headspace first and foremost is so important, because like I said, we see so much, we hear so much, we feel so much. I take a lot of the pain and suffering from the animals, and I carry that weight on my shoulder, and I'm sure a lot of people do. And it's hard sometimes to remember that we have to take care of ourselves as well. So I always like to talk about that first, because I think it's so important. And if we're not taking care of our headspace, that's going to negatively impact when we're out there fighting for the animals or speaking up for the animals, or if we're having that conversation with a truck driver and we just snap. I think that we can find a way to be a little bit more efficient and effective if we're taking care of our headspace. So one thing that I really learned, that there was this book that I read about Navy SEALs, and there was a quote that really stuck with me, and that's kind of about 6 years ago. It changed my entire life, and now it carries into every single day when I'm out there involved in activism. And it was, every second of every day, you have a choice to choose positivity or negativity. And you're going to need to choose whichever one is going to increase the happiness and positivity in your life. I know, another corny statement, but I thoroughly believe that this changed my life into everything that I do, including investigations, liberations, cubes of truth, slaughterhouses. I remind myself that I am the only one that has a choice on how I'm going to react to a certain situation. Now, you might have a family member pass away, this end of the spectrum, negativity, a host of different emotions. You might be at a vigil and connect with an individual in the truck and have your own host of emotions, and you might stub your toe, and that might create a little bit of negativity. So there's this spectrum of different events that happens in our life that are going to create something different going into our headspace. But something that I always advocate for, especially with activists, is remind yourself that you are the only person that gets to choose what goes in here, what sits here, what you label. Do you label it positive? Do you label it negative? Two people can be experiencing the same thing, and one person labels it negative and one person labels it positive. Both go in different directions. And it's easier said than done. Family member passes away. I'm not saying snap your finger and be like, I'm positive. I'm saying remind yourself that even if it's for 1 minute, you're thinking about this amazing smoothie bowl and chatting with your friends and doing something positive. If you can train your brain to have more positive thoughts than negative thoughts, I mean, we put out different chemicals when we have positive thoughts versus negative thoughts. Our brain is a muscle, and I'm all about training our brain to increase the positivity going in and eliminate the negativity, because I feel like that is step one at sustaining our activism, because I wouldn't say what we see as activists is positive. I say it's, unless we're looking at it from a progression state in this movement, but when we're out there doing the actions and seeing this pain, suffering, and injustice, it takes a huge negative toll on our mental well-being. So I think that we always need to remember that we have that choice, that no one else controls it. Another issue that I find with people occupying your headspace with negativity is other people. And I talked about it on Friday night, is the fear of what other people think of us, whether it's non-vegan family and friends or activists, this fear of missing out, that if we're sitting at home taking a rest day and everyone else is doing all these actions, we allow what other people think of us or their opinion of us, we allow that to matter more than our own sometimes. So if that's the case, which it is for a lot of people, it was for me in the first 6 months of my activism, I thought way too much what other people thought of me. And if I was like pushing someone's buttons, or if I was like judging them too much or doing this, and I realized that, you know what? The truth is on my side, and if I'm gonna not compromise my values and beliefs for anyone else to stand up for the animals, then I need to remember who has control over what goes in here. I used to let what other people think of me really control my entire headspace, and that wasn't helping me get out there and be the most effective ambassador for the animals. So remind yourself that you have that you have the control of what goes in there, especially when you're doing any form of activism. If you have a negative conversation at a cube of truth, this used to consume me. I would exhaust myself just debating with this ignorant human being and try to combat all their objections in the beginning of my activism, that it would completely wipe me out. If you've had these conversations, I'm sure you slept well that night, because it was so mentally and physically draining. So what I actually recommend doing in this case is take a break after that chat and remind yourself that it's not your fault. Just this happened in this situation. How can you get yourself mentally prepared for having the next conversation? And how can you maximize that time when speaking with people on the streets about veganism, so you're not exhausting everything that you have in these conversations, so you can work on being a little bit more effective. Excuse me. And then that's what I do with focusing on eliminating the negativity. And then last thing before I get into the activism part, there's a few things that I found that really helped me focus on increasing the positivity in my life, and things that we can do, simple things. You've all heard them before, but I always like to remind people. It's always a constant and great reminder to tell ourselves that we do have this choice. And it's the thoughts that we have, the words that we say, the things that we do, and the people that we spend time with. The thoughts and the words that we have are simple. If you're putting negative thoughts into your mind, if you're having this negative view on the world, and I know at times, I'm not saying that it's easy. I'm not saying that you need to eliminate any type of negative thought that you have on the world. I have it quite often after doing some actions that you feel like the world's not changing and we're not moving forward and we're not winning, and then you start to hate certain people, or I'm speaking for myself. But if you start putting negative thoughts into your mind, you have a greater odd of having negative words come out. And so when we're going into our actions and we have negativity going in, we have a higher odd of having negativity coming out. So if you just switch that up and try to focus on having more positive thoughts, being a little bit more hopeful and putting it out to the universe, if you believe in that you're going to have a better conversation, or you're going to be able to have a really powerful experience at this vigil. And you're going to be able to impact someone's life to maybe where they take veganism seriously. You're going to have greater odds of having more positive interactions. And I'm all about having positive understanding and love-based interactions when the time calls for it, because I'm all for those chanting and yelling as well when it's needed. The other thing is the things that we do. A lot of people, a lot of activists that I've spoken with will go out and will do all these actions. And they'll start to be they'll feel a little helpless and hopeless, and they'll get a little bit negative, and then they'll start doing things that aren't really positive. They won't get out of bed. It's harder for them sometimes. They'll just really fill their mind with negativity. They won't be going out and doing things that might lift them up. So I always advocate for start doing things that lift you up as well. Start surrounding yourself with people that are positive instead of negative. We all know what it's like to have some of those people in our lives that just take everything from us, and we just feel like we can't do much more for them, that it's toxic and it creates a lot of negativity in our own life. Now, I'm not saying kick those people to the curb. I'm just saying try to surround yourself with people that fill you up, that create more positivity in your life. Like when we get together with vegans and go out and eat or go do a really nice action together, that's positive, that's uplifting. The more we can do that, I just think the stronger this movement will get, and the easier it will be for us to get out there and more positively advocate for the animals. And I just quickly have to mention this, is that I'm not a professional. I haven't gone to school on any of this. This is just literally some tips and tricks that have worked so well for me and a lot of people that have come to these talks. But I'm also a big advocate for seeking professional help as well and being okay with that. I'm actually going to be working with Claire Mann. If anyone knows who she is, she's the vegan psychologist online, and I want to advocate for anyone seeking, I think all vegan activists should have a vegan psychologist. It's a professional that we can really just go back and forth with to help us when not everyone can. So I just wanted to mention that because we deal with a lot of compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, burnout. It's a real thing in this movement. So I just want to make sure everyone is taking care of themselves and that we are all super mindful as activists within the community to be a support system for each other. So now getting into the activism side of it. And I'll just repeat that the reason why I focus a lot on headspace first and this positivity and eliminating negativity is I think it's step one. For when we're getting out there to be the best, loudest, most effective voice for the animals, we've got to be taking care of what's up here and be laser focused on how we are feeling. So I first want to talk about my story of unsustainability, my burnout, just to give you a little bit of perspective on that. And then I'll talk into how I sort of regained control of my life, my activism, how I was able to come back and do more actions, travel more intensively, but feel like I am exhausting less energy and resources doing so. So it all started, it was 6 months of travel on my last tour, and I'd been to 12 countries at the time. I was doing 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 actions a week, depending on the week. I was not eating the best. I was getting all of the pizzas and ice creams and double cheeseburgers that all the cities I was going to had to offer. I wasn't sleeping well. I was just going full on, but I thought I was superhuman. I thought I had to do this. I thought I couldn't take a break because if I was taking a break, I wasn't doing justice for the animals. So I was telling myself I needed to go, 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 and go. And a lot of people, a lot of activists that I speak with feel this same way, that if they're taking a break, they're not out there speaking up for the animals. So they push themselves to the next level with trying to just fit as much activism in there as possible. And don't get me wrong, if you're out there doing a lot of activism, that's great. I'm always encouraging people to get out there and do more, but I wasn't listening to what my mind, body, and soul were screaming at me. So I was in Berlin. I just did 7 full days of actions with talks and early morning vigils and staying up late eating at all the vegan food that Berlin has to offer. And I was getting on a train in the morning to go to Hamburg to give a talk on vegan outreach. Went to bed at like 3, woke up at 6, no breakfast, got on the train to Hamburg, got picked up, taken to my workshop, and this was a pretty big workshop where people came from all over Germany. I was on stage. About 10 minutes into my talk, I started to feel like I couldn't put words together. Like it just really felt like I wasn't saying what I wanted to say. I started to get really hot. I started to sweat. I started to feel really afraid, and like I got really scared, and I'd never had felt like this in my life. My vision started, Gesundheit. My vision started to get a little blurry, and then there was a point when I just couldn't see. Everything went black, and so when I was able to see again, I told everyone that I had to take a break, and I had never ever stopped my talk before in my life. I've always done public speaking. It was something that I was always so comfortable with, but I had to stop, and I walked through the middle. It was like the worst experience of my life. Walked through the middle of the crowd, took about a 15-minute break outside, came back in, finished the talk after I had some food, and then we went to a Cube of Truth afterwards. I tried to do one outreach conversation, had to stop the conversation midway. I felt like I was going to pass out. I couldn't stand. It was just a really scary moment. So I went inside the mall, and this is when I sort of had some self-reflection and realized that that was just mind, body, soul shutting down. That's when I feel like I experienced burnout. Just, I was done, and that was my body telling me, dude, you're done. You can't even finish an outreach conversation. I had to bring someone else into it. Fast forward a couple months after talking with a bunch of professionals, it was a panic attack, and I have never in my life experienced a panic attack, anxiety attack, anything like that. And that was a big scare to me because I was going full on and I thought I was superhuman. And I thought I needed to do this, else I wasn't, like I said, doing work for the animals. But this is when I really had to take a step back. Because what happened was I'd been going full on, doing so much work and traveling around the world. I told myself I wasn't going to go back home. This is when I sort of forgot why I was doing what I was doing. I contemplated why I was an activist. I contemplated why I even went vegan in the first place, why I was traveling. It was the worst, 6 days just in my own headspace because I was so gone that I couldn't get out of bed. Thankfully, I had really amazing hosts that drew me baths and Spotify playlists and candles. And they were like, don't get off the couch, don't get out of bed. And it was so nice to have that support system. But internally, it was a very intense 6 days. I was out for 16 days total. But for those first 6 days, I was realizing that I wasn't taking care of my mental health. I wasn't taking care of my physical health. I wasn't getting enough sleep, getting enough exercise. I wasn't eating well. I was saying yes to everything. I was on my phone too much. I was just doing too much. So what happened is I needed to find a way to regain control of what I was doing because I knew I didn't want to go home. I knew I needed to stop thinking, why am I an activist? Why am I vegan? I needed to get these thoughts out of my head. So what I did, and this is what I encourage everyone to do in these talks, whether it's today, whether it's tomorrow, I took a pen to paper, take your fingers to keyboard or audio record it, but I wrote this list of everything I thought I needed to take better care of myself. It was like a personal vision board for self-care and self-love. Eat more kale. Eat more smoothie bowl. Now, eat more kale. I think kale is I say this every time, because some lady sent me her sheet a week later. She's like, I made my list, and eat more kale was number 3. So I was like, yeah. Listen to this positive Spotify playlist instead of this indie singer-songwriter negative breakup playlist, even though I love those songs, but it wasn't the best to fill me up in that moment. Call my friends. Leave my technology out of the room. Go to sleep before 10. Take 1 day off of social media a week. You get it. I started writing all of these things that I personally thought I needed to take better care of myself. And then what I recommend doing, even if it's one thing, even if it's just eat more kale, or go to bed before 10, or leave your phone out of your room, or say no to an action instead of just saying yes because you feel obligated to. Even if it's one thing, write it down and then start doing it. So after day 6, after I wrote this list down, I started to implement these things slowly. Eat more kale, call my friends, watch more Netflix, and get off of Instagram and stop looking at everyone's live streams of going into slaughterhouses. I started to do these things. And then what happened is I started to remember why I was vegan. Remember why I chose to do what I was doing and become active. I started to feel more motivated. I started to get out of bed and go on walks. I started to feel better, sleep better. My eyes started to clear up because I wasn't on my social media the whole time. I then went to a Cube of Truth. I then went to a Cube of Truth and a vigil. I then went to a Cube of Truth, a vigil, gave a talk, and then went to this protest. I started to regain that energy and in control of my life to get back out there and start doing activism again, which made me feel good because for those 16 days-ish, I felt like I actually wasn't doing work for the animals. It's okay to take breaks, and I'll talk about that in a moment, but the reason why I'm so passionate about this is because if you've ever experienced burnout in regards to activism, well, I guess in life it's horrible, but my goal is to hopefully have activists never experience what I experienced, because it was probably the worst, it was one of the worst points of my life of just sort of where I was in my headspace, physically speaking, spiritually speaking, if you subscribe to that. It was just extremely tough to be there, and I realized I needed to make a change, so that's why I wrote this list down. So whether it be one thing on that list, whether you jot it down in your notes on your phone or talk to it in your phone, do it. Even if you don't think you need self-care and self-love days, chat with me. I'd love to know your secrets. But write some stuff down so you can just start taking, or being laser focused on how you're feeling on the inside, because it creeps up on us. I thought I was perfect. I thought everything was going well until that day in that speech. And it was really tough because I don't want us to be out for 16 days when we don't want to be out for 16 days. I want us to be out there fighting and giving all of our energy and our resources for the animals, but I don't think we're ever going to get there unless we're focusing on ourselves too. So there was this thing that I had to overcome, and another thing that I like to talk about with all activists is there's that feeling like not doing enough for the animals, and I don't know if any of you felt like this, because I did, but when I took a break, I felt really bad. I was like, oh, if I'm not out there at a Cube of Truth, I'm not, doing work for the animals, everyone else is out there. I started to compare myself to others, and I started to feel really bad. So I came up with this solution for this feeling that we're not doing enough, because I think in my call to action for everyone, I want to make it mandatory for activists to take breaks. Because there's a lot of people that I met around the world that are like, no, screw that, I'm not taking a break, I'm doing action, 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 and I'm gonna go for it. But then I see them, burnout, 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 burnout. It's a one-way ticket to burnout if you're not taking breaks. But I had to come up with this little analogy for myself, a way that I could be okay with taking a break, and one that I hope would inspire other activists and empower other activists to work together and take breaks. So I look at it as like activists, the activist movement community, we're part of a team. And our end goal is to win the game, is total animal liberation. And I compared it to a hockey game. If you haven't watched hockey, I definitely recommend looking up a hockey game on YouTube to see this analogy. A hockey team's, both teams, they want to win the game. That's their end goal. So we both have our goals, win the game. But no hockey team is going to win the game unless they're substituting players. It's very hard to win a game when you have players at 30% strength, 40% strength, 50% strength. You win a game, sports game, when you have players at 81, 75, 91, maybe a 60 in there. But you see what I mean? You need to substitute players and you need to take breaks. So I put that into sort of this little thing to remind myself of why it's okay to take breaks. Is we're part of a team. And the best way and the most effective way to get to that end goal is to work together as a team, but to work on substituting as well. But the thing that jumped out to me the most about the hockey game is that, I feel like I just said that super Canadian, hacky. So I was just in Canada and they called me out for saying it super American. So a hockey game, when they substitute players, if you've ever watched, the game doesn't stop. 2 players jump out when 2 players jump back onto the ice. 3 players jump over the wall, 3 players jump onto the ice. You could score a goal and win the game while players are substituting. So I look at that as the same in the activist movement. When you two are taking a break, you two are jumping over the wall and you're out there fighting. When this half of the room's taking a break, this half of the room's out there fighting. When this entire room's taking a break, Seattle is out there fighting. This is how I like to look at our movement, is we need to be mindful that when we're taking a break, someone else is out there fighting, and we need to always be encouraging people to understand this, because that made me feel so much better when I was taking rest days, as I was able to finally get off my phone and I was able to sleep easy and not compare myself to others and not feel bad for not being at the Cube of Truth if I needed a break, or not be at this vigil if I needed a rest day. I knew that there were people out there fighting for the animals when I was taking a break. And if we all remind ourselves that, and we all hold ourselves accountable for taking a break, so that when we're taking a break, you're refueling, recharging your batteries, filling your cup, whatever analogy you want to use, so that now when this person's taking a break, you're back out there at 80%, 90%, maybe 100%. So then when you deplete your batteries a little and are taking a break, someone else is recovering. And the thing that I like to do, it's fun. You don't have to do this. I just think it's a fun thing to do. When you take a break, message Matthew and be like, hey, dude, I'm taking a break. I need you to go out there and fight a little harder today. Can you take a couple more photos, have a few more outreach conversations? Or if you're taking a break and your friend is like contemplating going out and doing an action, be like, hey, I need a break. You should totally go out to the vigil this week. Take some photos for me, for you, for the animals, and just be empowering each other to go out there, because then now when your friend needs a break, they're going to message you and be like, hey, can you go out there? Just so that we can be empowering everyone to go out and fight for the animals. So sometimes when I take a break, I'll post on social media. I'll be like, hey, I'm taking a break. Encouraging everyone to go out and do a little bit more activism this weekend. Send me a photo, send me a message, just to keep that sort of like a fun thing, but to hold each other accountable. And I think that is so important in this movement, is if we hold each other accountable, that when your friend needs a break, they're going to reach out to you. And if we can always work together in this team, I focus a lot on unity and this togetherness. If we can be in this team and work towards that end goal together, that's going to be how we're going to, most efficiently get to that end goal and sustain our activism long term. So, hockey game. If you haven't seen a hockey substitution, look it up. It's pretty, I don't know how they jump over the wall, but it's really cool. So a few more things that I wanted to talk about. There's only so much we can do with taking care of our headspace, right? I think it's an important thing that we need to focus on, take care of our headspace. Then we need to focus on self-care and self-love. I think that is the most important thing. Being in tune with who you are, listening to your mind, body, soul, spirituality, if that's what you subscribe to. Listen to those things. Your mind, body, and soul are going to scream at you when they need a break. It's just about listening to them. And I think if we want to be the most efficient and effective ambassadors for the animals, there's a few more things that I came up with that I think we can be a little bit more laser focused on and work on in regards to our activism. Because I think we can, if we utilize our energy correctly, we could do more activism and feel less burnt out if we're doing it in a certain way. So in addition to self-care, self-love, and headspace, I found that we can also be working on utilizing our skills, utilizing the tools that we have, and utilizing our support system, or this togetherness. And I'll go over those in specific. So our skills. Every single one of you has a unique set of traits or skills that makes you different. It makes you special, that you excel at. Passions, hobbies, whatever it is. Maybe you're a writer. Maybe you're a musician. Maybe you're into theater. I'm just throwing these out there. If I hit it on the spot, awesome. But what I found is that a lot of people get into activism and they think that there's only one form of activism. They think they're very like narrow-minded, like, oh, I only could go do a Cube of Truth and have outreach conversations, or I can only go to a slaughterhouse and bear witness. And that sometimes holds people back from doing activism or giving them their all. So what I found was, from meeting so many activists around the world, that there's endless amounts of activism that we can do out there. And one way to sustain our activism long term is to work on aligning our activism with our passions and trying to maximize our energy that way. So if you love to write and that fills you up and that's what you're good at, try to align your writing, some of your writing, with animal activism. Start a blog, write a book. I had this lady in New Zealand who came to this talk, and this still blows my mind. This was like 7 months ago. I gave this talk, and then about 3 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago, she sent me a message, hey, I was at your talk in New Zealand, in Dunedin, and I really loved the whole aligning your activism with your passion, because I always felt like I was going out and doing activism that I wasn't comfortable with. So I listened to your advice, and I wrote a book. And I was like, wow, you wrote a book in like 6 months? That's pretty amazing. She's like, I'd love to send you a copy. And she sent me a copy, and I just thought that was so amazing. I haven't read it yet. My goal is to read it over the holidays. But she aligned her passion with her activism, and I asked her a few follow-up questions. Did you wake up extremely excited to write this book? She goes, every day. That's why I wrote it so fast. Did it fill you up knowing that people might read it and might change their lifestyle and their behaviors? And she goes, absolutely. She goes, I called it the shed, and it's sort of like this human perspective of being inside of this animal agricultural system. And I was like, wow, I'm really excited to read it. And so that was her utilizing what she was good at. And we all know what it's like if we go to a class and we take mechanical engineering, and let's say you don't care about mechanical engineering, I don't, cool for the people who do, but you're probably not going to pay attention in that class. You're probably not going to want to go to it as much. You won't give your all in that class. You might not make a good connection with the teacher. You go to a class, let's say you love ceramics, and you're in a ceramics class. You might never want to miss class, really connect with the teacher, get a lot of value from that class. So the same thing with our activism. There was a lady in, what's that country? Netherlands. And she was like, I was never comfortable doing vegan outreach because I always felt like I was intruding on someone. My passion was dance. So what I did is I went out to the streets, I set up a little music box and I started this dance and everyone created this circle around me, and then I paused the music and I was like, all right, if anyone would like to stick around, I'm going to talk about veganism. And I thought this was so cool because then 90% of the people left, but 10% of the people came forward and sat down. It gave her a comfortable space to speak up for the animals. That was her mixing her passion, her hobbies, what she was good at, with her activism. If you like editing movies, edit movies. We all know that powerful movies are floating around this movement, creating a lot of change. The other way I look at it is like, I love communicating with people. I majored in communication. I was a salesman. Me going out and doing vegan outreach is one of my favorite forms of activism because it comes natural to me. Whereas someone who might be an introvert, have social anxiety, hate speaking with people, for them to go do vegan outreach might not be the best form of activism or the best way that they can utilize their energy right now. It might change in time. So I want them to flip that and start finding activism that works for them, that they're comfortable doing, because there's this 80-20 rule, as if in business it's to be an efficient or effective business, you would essentially want 80% of your profits coming from 20% of your customers. That would be amazing if you could do that. I look at it in the activism world as we want 80% of our results coming from 20% of our actions or our efforts. That would be utilizing our energy efficiently, causing less or having less odds of experiencing burnout. This person with social anxiety and is introvert, if they jump into doing vegan outreach, they're most likely going to be using 80% of their energy, which is going to exhaust them to maybe only get 20% results. Whereas when I go out and do vegan outreach, it's what I love to do, it's what I'm natural at. That's me utilizing only 20% of my energy to get 80% of my results. So this girl who wrote the book, 20% of her energy giving her 80% results. She's doing something that she's comfortable with, that she's passionate about, that comes natural to her. So if we can work on finding forms of activism that aligns with our passions and our skills, it's just one next step at utilizing our energy a little bit more efficiently. The other way I look at it with 80-20 is if you have 100% activism time, not your lifetime, family time, work time, whatever time you have allocated for your activism, have 80% of your time for activism be with the activism that you love. 20% to try other forms of activism, to support other organizations, to go back and forth, because maybe you might realize that you do like another form of activism or another style. This way you can go back and forth, but be focusing on maximizing your energy on the stuff that comes natural to you. That's aligning your activism with your skills. The other thing is togetherness. I really believe that the only way we're going to achieve this end goal, the only way we're going to go up like this instead of down, is if we work together. I talked about it a little the other night. There's this thing called infighting. I don't want to be super negative, but I always want to chat about this. This is in any social justice movement. I think it's just in any part of life, any working environment. It's people within the movement or within the organization that are fighting each other. So it is so present in every single country, every single city that I went to, there was some form of infighting happening. Vegan versus vegan, activist versus activist, restaurant versus activist. Like it comes from all different angles. And what this does is it breaks us apart. Instead of coming together and working towards that end goal, it creates this separation. There shouldn't be this, my form of activism is better than yours, my organization is cooler or bigger than yours, my platform is bigger than, it shouldn't be any of this. It should be, if the end goal is the same, then let your organization do you and your organization do you, and then from time to time, like hang out with each other and do other forms of activism and support each other's activism. If the end goal isn't the same, then we can have a conversation with those individuals or those persons and those people and trying to have them align it with that end goal of animal liberation. And what I found is majority of infighting happens on social media. I'm sure all of you have seen it or been a part of it. It's that standard screenshot attacking someone and then this like 400 comment thread of like people hating on each other, and like it exhausts us. If you're not even involved in it, I've woken up sometimes and just have been like reading some of the infighting that happens on like a vegan revolution post or on one of my posts or something like that, and it drains me. My heart's racing, I'm getting frustrated, and it's hard to see. And I'll give a quick example. Does anyone know who Sonia Say is? So she's an activist. She's done a bunch of YouTube videos advocating for the animals, and I like to talk about this because it is one of the most ridiculous, I don't even know how to think about it. It's like the most ridiculous thing that I've ever seen happen in this vegan movement. And it took us so far away from our end goal. Basically, she has a rescued Fennica fox, Jumanji, super cute, check him out. And someone posted this thing of, I don't know if the photo was edited or if it was from when Jumanji was sick or something, posted this photo of Jumanji and then started like bashing Sonia for Sonia not being vegan, and because Sonia feeds Jumanji vegan cat food, which the vet says is completely fine for this specific breed of fox to eat vegan cat food. Can thrive on eating vegan cat food, I'll clear that. Basically, this person wrote and just slandered her and said she was supporting animal cruelty and isn't vegan and is a disgrace, and it was just this like wild post. What this did, in a 48-hour period, it was shared, not viewed, shared over 16,000 times within the vegan movement. That was the only thing that seemed to be going on in this vegan movement. Not animals are dying every second of every day. It was Sonia Say feeding her fox vegan cat food. She got hate messages, death threats, rape threats. Her Facebook account got shut down. She went into an extremely dark place. And now what this did is it took us off our vision of our end goal, and it focused us on this infighting thing that was happening. What do you think the meat, dairy, and egg industry were looking at when they were looking at all these social media accounts and being like, vegans, fighting each other and bringing each other down? This is why I think it's so important to talk about this. This doesn't happen every day, but it happens a lot. And how I think this could have been solved is, person has an issue with Sonia, messages her, Sonia, hope you're having a great day. I have a few questions about your fox and the food that you feed Jumanji. Do you have a moment to chat about it? Oh, sure, absolutely. Do you want to call, video chat? Blah, blah, blah. I'm concerned that you're feeding Jumanji vegan cat food, and I don't think that that's right. Oh, yeah, my vet actually says you can. Here's the information, blah, blah. Oh, cool. Thank you for clearing that up. Bye. In a perfect world, I think that's how it could have happened. So the reason why I tell that story is I hope to speak with every activist and say, if you see infighting happening in the thread on social media, please don't screenshot it. Please don't contribute to that. If there's an issue you have with a specific individual or a restaurant or an organization, chat about it with the person you have the issue with. Try to communicate. Try to work on the relationships and hopefully have this be solved. Like, it was surprising, but a lady raised her hand in Vancouver, and she told me that she actually contributed to infighting and started to post in different Facebook groups in Vancouver. She was slandering this restaurant because they wouldn't share her Animal Rights March event. And she just went on this attack on social media, posting it all over. And what this did is it stopped people from supporting that vegan business, and it created tension within the community. And she agreed that that wasn't the best way to go about it. She could have gone into that restaurant, had a chat with the owner, and just worked out their differences. Even if the restaurant didn't share the stuff, they could have had a conversation, and I think it would have still supported a vegan business and not taken business away from this vegan restaurant, and created a lot less tension. Because the other thing that really upsets me about this infighting is, think of all the new vegans and the new activists that come into these groups, and this is what they see, is activists fighting other activists. And I know this is very negative, and I'm all about positivity, but it's real and it's happening. So if we can all be mindful of what's going on, just work on relationship building and speaking with other human beings as another human being, and pick up the phone and call someone. Send them a private message. Don't screenshot, this person sucks, this restaurant sucks, screw this organization. Like, if you want to voice your opinion, I know it's a public platform, but let's try to work on strengthening this movement instead of separating it. So that's why I like to give a little bit of a talk on infighting, because I think also, going back to the being a support system for each other, if we are working together and lifting each other up, we're going to exhaust less energy and resources. I've had days where I have been consumed in threads on social media, and it has forced me to not go to an action the next day. because I've been so exhausted and been like, screw activists right now. Like, I hate you. I don't want to talk about you. I don't want to be surrounded by you right now. So instead of that, let's work on lifting each other up instead of bringing each other down. Should be super easy, but it's not. I think they said, don't quote me on this, but Martin Luther King spent about 70% of his time dealing with infighting. Imagine what he could have done with a lot more of that time. So, work together. The last one, so utilize your skills, align them with your activism. Also work on togetherness, because if we're working together and not apart, less energy is exhausted and consumed by looking at the negative stuff. The other thing is our tools. So education is key. In the beginning of my activism, I thought I knew it all and wouldn't go research certain things because I wanted to be right. I wanted to say, I'm taking a stand, I know everything. But if you've done vegan outreach in the beginning and didn't know everything, we know that it's more exhausting to have that outreach conversation where we're racking our brain to try to find the way to combat this person's objection, and what Bible verse is this, and what's the nutrient whatever of this food. Like, we exhaust a lot of energy, of mental energy and physical energy sometimes, trying to like white lie around conversations and figure things out. When you're more professional, or when you're more educated on a specific topic, if you're a salesperson and you know more about your product, it's going to be easier to sell your product. You're going to utilize less energy. In the beginning of my sales career, my first 2 months of sales, it was exhausting because I knew nothing about my catalog of products. Same thing with my vegan outreach. It was tough to know all the different ways to combat all the different objections. So I utilized a lot of energy, and I was so exhausted for the first 4 months of my doing vegan outreach. When I started to educate myself and utilize the endless tools, one, we have people within the community that all have different backgrounds and different jobs and have different information. Utilize what each other know. Also, we have books, movies, documentaries, blogs, websites. Consume all this stuff and become more of a professional on different areas. We're all a professional, like I said the other night, on the ethical side of veganism. That's 100%. But I'm still not a professional on the health side of it, the religious side of it, the environmental side. I feel like I know a lot from just doing this so much and educating myself. But the more I know, the easier it is to combat those objections in person, and the less energy that I exhaust. And I've said that a lot, and I hope that that connection is made, that the less energy we use when we're out doing activism, the greater odds we're going to have it not burning out, because we're able to sustain our level of work with going out there, not like in the beginning, I had 50-minute outreach conversations, but I just didn't want to let them go. Maybe you've had one as well. And I was just so angry and trying to figure out that information. And I was exerting a lot of energy, which forced me to burn out a little. So become a professional on certain things. And even if it's not a professional, educate yourself. There are so many tools at our disposal, and we should be using them and constantly working on strengthening what's going on in here in regards to the information that's out there. And then the other thing that I just added sort of to this talk, because I got a lot of feedback, is the tool of social media. And I've talked a little bit about it throughout the conversation. But I actually think social media is a majority reason as to why activists burn out. And it's not talked about. And I'll tell you why. I think there is the fact that we compare ourselves to other people. There is fear of missing out. There is the putting value on external things like likes, follows, comments, and maybe this doesn't apply to you, which is great, but it does to a majority of people in this movement. So comparing ourselves to other people. From personal experience, in the beginning of my activism, I was always on social media looking at all of these people doing all of these actions and doing all these cool things and liberating animals and giving talks, and I wanted to do that, but I created so much stress and this mental battle that it was exhausting me, and I was just constantly scrolling. And the other day, it still happens, when the Meet the Victims 2 happened in Brisbane and they had the piggery shut down and 170 activists were in there. I was like, damn, I want to do that. I want to be in there. I'm just literally eating a smoothie bowl today, chilling on my couch, watching Netflix. I exhausted a lot of my energy and my resources looking at that social media. So comparing ourselves to others and this fear of missing out is something that I always advocate for, trying to separate yourself. There's a lot of people that have, not calling anyone out, but there's a lot of people that have an unhealthy relationship with social media, myself included. Was a huge part of my life for the last couple years where I had an extremely toxic relationship with social media. And it wasn't until I started to objectively see that and try to work past that and establish a healthier relationship and use this tool in a way that it's benefiting this movement and the animals, instead of using it as a tool to put myself into this downward spiral of I'm not a good activist because I'm not shutting down a piggery. So I really want to advise people to just reevaluate your current relationship with social media. The other part of it too is there's two more parts: likes, follows, and comments. If you've experienced this sense of like, I'm not getting this amount of likes, comments, or follows, I am not doing good work for the animals, that's how it was for me in the beginning. And that brought me down. That was just another element of how social media was bringing me down. And we may not really realize it until we objectively take that view of how we are with social media. But it matters. What matters about social media is the value that you're putting out into this world. And if you're open, if you're honest, if you're authentic, that's how social media should be used, and just promoting the message. And then the last thing about social media is consuming. Some people are like, yeah, what do I do? Every freaking thing on my Instagram is vigil and slaughterhouse and this and that. I go, mute it. You can create on Instagram, on Facebook. You don't have to unfollow the people on Instagram. You don't have to unfriend them on Facebook. You can create however you want your profile or your timeline to look. So there was a time, and I still have it now, where I pretty much muted everyone's story on Instagram so that I'm not forced to click their story and watch all of this pain and suffering. I'm seeing enough of it myself in person that I wanted to get to a point when I wasn't sitting there in bed in the morning, waking up, and the first thing I'm seeing is a pig screaming, or I'm seeing a cow being like driven off of a tree. I started to design my social media platform how I thought was best to take care of what's up here and to make me positively want to get out there for the animals instead of negatively comparing myself or consuming this negativity. Because like I said the other day, even when you're at a cube of truth, even when you're looking at social media, consuming that is secondary trauma. You're not there. You're not in the flesh. You're not experiencing it firsthand, but you're experiencing it from watching it on a screen. So you have the power to design your own social media layout on what content you want to consume. So for anyone who is feeling like they're being overwhelmed with social media, mute everyone, and then go to their page on a day that you want to check out their page. But it's so easy, and social media does a great job at making the stories pop up first or videos pop up right there. So design your social media platform in a way that's going to best take care of what's up here. Then just to sum things up before a little Q&A, I just want to remind everyone because I truly feel we're going to be able to sustain our activism long term if we focus on taking care of our headspace, listening to our mind, body, and soul, trying to create more positive thoughts than negative thoughts. But if you are dealing with these emotions, fear, anger, frustration, sadness, it's okay to have them. There's a good reason why. Just try to process those, view them objectively, and then work on the solution. And if we work together with a support system, especially in the community, it'll be a lot easier to do that. Focus on aligning your activism with some of your passions, with your skills. Utilize the tools that we have, and then maybe utilize our tools like social media a little bit more effectively. And then also work on togetherness. Work on being in the community and supporting each other to lift each other up instead of bring each other down. And create your little eat more kale list, whatever you think you need to take better care of yourself. I'm telling you, even if you just write one thing down and start doing it, you will see significant improvements in life satisfaction and when you're going out and doing actions, because it's making you mindful of what you feel that you need. And I know this is a lot and kind of all over the place with positivity and negativity and activism. I just wanted to share my experiences with you and what I've learned along the way and some of the feedback that I've got from people and what has helped them. And now I feel by doing these things and following these steps, I'm able to, and I definitely need a rest day. So tomorrow and the next day is like, I'm being mindful. I'm going to take some days off of social media. I think I should. So I just hope that you were able to gain some value from this, even if it's one thing. I really, really appreciate you being here. I know this is a very unique talk within this movement, but I think it's definitely something that we need to be focusing a lot more on, because as we can see this movement, we need to strengthen each other up. We need to bring each other up and work on not bringing each other down. So thank you again. And does anyone have any questions?
So I have mixed feelings about the number of events, because I feel like it's great that there's so many events, but then it makes it hard to decide what to attend. So do you think it's more effective for the end goal to have less events, but more people attend them, or have more events with less people attending each one?
It's a really good question.
If there's even an answer to that.
Yeah, well, I think it could go both ways, and I think it depends on the event. So let's take a Cube of Truth, for example. Like, ideally, you would want a massive cube with like 40 screens and 100 people on outreach in the middle of this area that's having hundreds of people walk by, right? That would be a great way to strengthen and maximize that event's reach. And like the 24-hour Cube of Truth in Berlin, if you saw, we had 1,400 activists come through. We had a 400-person cube. It was like ridiculous, and we had so many people in a space. So I think that would be a good thing. But it's hard because there's so many different forms of activism, right? You have your chalking, you got your video stuff, your social media, your Cube of Truth, your disruptions, your civil disobedience. So I think it would really depend on the area as well. So let's say you're in a place like Seattle or Portland. I feel like access to different forms of activism would be a lot easier than if you were in a place like Dunedin, New Zealand, which was like a really small town surrounded by dairy farms. I would say then centralize on making big, impactful events. But if you're in a place like Portland, then I think just have maybe not more of a frequency, but maybe work together with the organizers within all the different organizations and be like, let's be strategic with this. So maybe more people can attend all of these different events. Because I like to have more events showing up, just different styles of activism, because you might not like the cube, you might not like bearing witness, you might not like chalking. So it does give people access to different forms of activism. So I think it would come down to a really nice strategy, maybe. That would be my answer. I know it's probably not a yes or no for you, because I can see it being both ways. I think you have to take into account the city, the community, what organizations are present, and how much time you have to do those sort of things. If anyone feel free to add your own input as well. Maybe one of the organizers has a view on that.
I think different kinds of our activism affect the public different too. So someone might see a cube and walk by because it's scary, but when they see us just holding signs, that might open their eyes more too. So I think doing all the different events is important.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely appreciate the variety. It's just like personally, when I see there's so many events scheduled and I feel like, oh, I only have the time to attend one and I have to pick one.
Sure.
And then it's like, well, I want to go and, have my time be effective.
Sure.
And I want other people's time to be effective instead of just having like, a few people at like 5 different events on the same day.
Yeah.
If there was a way, like basically I guess just communication.
Yeah, well, now that you said that, I think it really makes me think of you also, yes, structure and organization within the community would be good, but then you need to figure out, like with your allocated time for activism, what is going to fill you up the most? Where are you going to be most effective? For me, I love and support disruptions and stuff, but that's not my favorite form of activism where I utilize my best energy and my resources. Doing vegan outreach is for me. So I'm going to choose, if the cube and a disruption were happening at the same time, I'm going to go choose to do vegan outreach on this day. But who knows? Maybe next month I then switch it up and I'm like, all right, I'm going to do a disruption today and sort of like go back and forth. So maybe if we continue with having multiple events, the consistency of those events stay the same, so that next month you do cube this time on your Friday if you have available, and then the next Friday that you have available for activism, you do the disruption or something like that. So I think it would, if that makes sense. Yes?
There are a lot of events, but I think the organizers should do a really good job of working together so things aren't at the exact same
Cool.
time. So I think strategically, it's been done pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I should clarify. I don't necessarily mean like the same time, the same day, but if there's multiple events in a week and I feel like I only have enough free time to go to like one, then I have to choose.
Yeah. Well, I guess if you wanted to, I need to start having my own views on things. I would say I like more events, because my goal is to create more activists, to empower more activists, to encourage more activists to choose activism that fits with them, and that's going to be easier when we have different forms of activism out there. Anyone else?
As a local organizer, I think there was an entire month where I didn't organize a single event because I knew there
Yeah.
And I like wanted to do stuff, but I was like, I don't want people to get burnt out. I'm not going to organize anything this whole
Yeah.
month and just attend other events that other
Yeah.
organizers were doing. There's a bake sale happening right now across town.
Cool.
All the cupcake vegans are over there.
Hey, I went there before here.
You know, it works in concert. 'Cause
I used to be a cupcake vegan.
people who won't come to this, but they'll go support the animal sanctuary at the bake sale. So
Yeah.
it feels all positive.
Anything else? Got one in the back, yes?
Yeah, so I'm just curious what's on your bookshelf in terms of books.
Ooh. So nothing over the last 6 months because I've been extremely exhausted from the last 14 months of travel. But sitting on my bookshelf at home, wanting to read again. Well, there's this new book that someone recommended to me after one of these talks because I focus a lot on positivity as well. It's called the PMA effect, Positive Mental Attitude Effect. And they said it was like totally in alignment with how I believe and how I feel. So that's going to be on my holiday reading list. The 4-Hour Work Week. If anyone knows the 4-Hour Work Week, it is an amazing, I've read it once like 8 years ago, and maybe 7 years ago. I'm ready to read it again. It's all about how we can maximize our workflow and how we can get creative and really, kind of like with sustainable activism, utilize less energy and be more effective with the time we have allotted for work. And so that was an amazing book. Right now, The Untethered Soul. It's one of those books, I have one more book after that. The Untethered Soul is like one where I just can't read more than a paragraph without contemplating like life and like, it's like, how am I gonna finish this book? And it's a beautiful, amazing book. Some of the stuff I talk about tonight is in this book about like objectively viewing how we're feeling and I know it sounds weird, but like getting in touch with the roommate that's in our head. We always have that voice speaking, and it's really about like being in love with like who you are on the inside, and everything that's going on in here is you, and then how to take that into life. And then the other one that I'm trying to get through is Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins. It's another one of those books where I'm like reading every sentence and I'm like, oh, now I gotta like write notes about it, and it's just an amazing book. So those 4 books are on my 2019. I would like to read those 4 books in 2019. Yeah, great question, by the way. I love book questions. Giant study. Yes?
So you talked a lot about infighting, but do you have any suggestions on how to deal with a fellow activist, but if it's not activism related, but they're being harmful?
It probably, I really wish I would have paid attention in my conflict resolution class in college. Probably would have helped, but I think just what I have been doing this year, being more open with myself and speaking with people when I do have an issue, is just being open and authentic and just sending them a message or calling them like, hey, like, really want to chat with you about a few things, and just try doing it in person and expressing how you feel and seeing if they're receptive and open. Like, I don't know much about proper ways of conflict resolution. I would just say it needs to, like, if you have something going on and you're feeling like that it's creating this conflict and it's hindering your relationship with them or something within the community, whether it's activism or work or something like that, I'm a big believer now in just being honest and speaking with that individual, and just coming from a place of true honesty and love, and being like, hey, I just want to, this is how I'm feeling. Do you feel, like, are you even feeling this way? Can we chat about a few things? That's what I would recommend. And maybe like doing some online conflict resolution classes. New Year's resolution for me. Yes?
Well, I want to say thank you for bringing up infighting.
Yeah.
That's one of the most exhausting things for me.
Sure.
You're so busy like trying to get the word out and watching slaughterhouse footage and all these terrible things. And you don't expect, people who should be your allies, being one of your biggest impedances.
You didn't stop the truck, you suck. We're out there, like, seriously. Okay, sorry, continue, yeah.
I was wondering if you had any recommendations about, like interpersonal stuff, obviously you can just engage them, you can deal with their feelings, and then they can do whatever they have to do, react however they have to react. But I was wondering if you had any recommendations for how to deal with people who repeatedly are toxic, who repeatedly cause issues with other people. Obviously calling people out on social media is not the best idea.
Yeah.
And just making big posts and being like, this person sucks.
Yeah.
But I just feeling at that middle ground between like personal messaging and try to talk to them versus like, you know, calling them out?
Yeah, so kind of the same thing with what I told you. What I would recommend, because I had to do this when I was an organizer as well. There's always, and I still deal with it in certain places, and it might not work, like with the whole being open and honest, they might just shut you out even more. But if it's causing a problem within a certain group, within a certain community, I wouldn't just say like, openly put out like, this person stinks, you're banned, I hate you, blah, blah, blah. Try to have that conversation set up. I always advocate for a person to person. Like try to set up, like, hey, can we grab a coffee? I just want to chat with you about some things. I'm feeling a certain way and I'm just trying. I said this with someone like a month ago and I had this issue and I didn't know how they felt. And I was like, hey, I'm feeling a certain way and I just really want to know if like you're feeling this way too, or if I'm just kind of out over in left field. Can we chat about it? Picked up a phone call and ended up being like I didn't read it properly. So I would say communicate with them. If it's causing an issue within a group, you have the power to eliminate them if you do. From that certain, eliminate sounds really bad. Remove them from that group, but let them know and why. Don't just eliminate them from the group. Eliminate. Okay, don't just remove them from the group. Just send them a message if they're not chatting with you, or if when you do have that chat, they're still being toxic in this community. I'll just say, hey, I want to let you know, just so that we can make sure we're having the most positive interactions in this group. It's set up to motivate people and to encourage people to come out to do activism. I'm going to remove you from this group. And if you want to chat about that, if you want to come back in this group, I just want to make sure you're in alignment with these guidelines that we have so we can look at the entire group. So we can work on strengthening this group instead of creating some sort of tension there. How does that sound to you? I know it doesn't really, it doesn't really matter. You're going to do it anyway. But if you make it about like, and how do you feel about that? They might be like, I totally get it. You suck, But at least you were there and you made the conversation about being with them instead of just, I'm removing you. You suck. Leave. It's about that conversation. Hey, can we chat? First step. This is how I'm feeling. What are your thoughts? Are we even on the same page? Was there a miscommunication? Then if it's causing the group harm, as you know, this group is set up to motivate, encourage, empower, whatever. I'm gonna ask you either to leave this group for now, or I'm gonna be removing you just to make sure we're having a positive light so that we can encourage more people to get out there and fight for the animals. I'm assuming it's in the activist community. And is that okay? How does that sound? And go that route. That's the steps I used to take. Sorry. No more questions? That was a yawn? Okay, cool. A little stretch. No, I really appreciate everyone being here again, and thank you to the organizers for setting this place up and for everyone donating for having this beautiful social justice center. I mean, it's great. Every city should have one of these. And I hope that you continue to work together in this movement, and it seems like Portland has their fair share of activist events going on. So really great to see how many new people came to get active this week. So it was really nice or this weekend. Had a lot of people at the Cube, 4 or 5 people that had never been to a vigil before, which was really cool. So it's always nice to see people getting active and coming to a talk like this, which I know is kind of not talked about. So I really am so grateful for any of my talks that people come to, but this one specifically because I think it's something that I'm just really passionate about and would like to see us I would like to see no one experience what I experienced. So thank you again for being here. And thank you, organizers.